After winning all of these accolades and we got to a certain point as a practice, I still had this nagging feeling that hadn't achieved anything that I'd really set out to really achieve, which was to design public buildings, cultural buildings, public spaces. I wanted to work on projects that made a difference. And of course, designing nice houses and nice homes, it does make a difference, but only to a few people that get to benefit from them. I didn't really set out to work for wealthy, middle-class people. You know, I really enjoyed the process of designing those houses and building them. But to me, I kind of wasn't really fulfilled as an architect. I just felt there was something else there. Maybe it was just the grass was always greener. I'd had this itch and I hadn't scratched it.
Welcome to Architecture Business Club, the show that helps you build a better business in architecture so you can enjoy more freedom, flexibility and fulfillment. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss another episode. We're joined by Carl Turner, founder of Turner.Works, an architecture and urban design studio specialising in the early activation of sites and the meanwhile use of buildings. Carl has founded and set up several meanwhile projects, including Pop Brixton, Peckham Levels and Ashford Coachworks. The building of his own Brixton home was filmed by Grand Designs, and Carl has gone on to feature on Channel 4's Ugly House to Lovely House as an expert in low-cost, high-impact design. To learn more about Carl's practice, head over to Turner.Works, or to connect with Carl directly online, go ahead and connect with Carl over on LinkedIn, and I'll put a link in the show notes to both of those places. Carl, welcome to the club.
Hi, John. Thanks for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Since we first connected, I've been really excited about getting this conversation on the podcast. So it's a pleasure to have you here. Carl, before we get stuck into things, tell me a little bit about what you enjoy doing outside of work.
Yeah, I guess I actually, weirdly, one of my hobbies is renovating houses, which doesn't sound like much of a break. But I think particularly as the practice has grown and I'm a bit more detached from the real hands-on of things, it's just something I've done a lot over the years. I've probably renovated about 30 properties when I thought back about it. And I just really love actually the whole process of stripping something back and then rebuilding it and reimagining it. And I think when I'm not doing up houses, the other thing I really do love doing is traveling, and something I couldn't do that much when I was younger because I just, quite frankly, couldn't afford it. But as I've got older, I've managed to just spend much more time traveling, and I find it just really inspiring, and it's just a way of really recharging batteries and just seeing amazing things that are happening all over the world and being inspired and energized and bringing back ideas. And so I think, weirdly, last year I had a sabbatical, which is another whole story, but I managed to mix up the whole year with like a month traveling, a month working on a house, another month traveling, another renovation few weeks. So it was my ideal year, fixing up old houses and traveling the world.
Oh, that sounds absolutely ideal. So more years like that, Carl, that would be good, wouldn't it? If you can do that sort of thing again, that nice balance between your interests outside of work and what you're doing at Turner.Works too.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. If I could build a whole life around that, well, I kind of have, but work is a commitment and it does take time and energy. So, but I think it is important to take those moments, those breaks, even small ones where you can kind of take a step back and maybe appreciate what you've got and where you've got to, and then think about the challenges ahead and where you want to go. Anybody knows if you want to run a good business, you have to kind of design the business. Really, you can't. If you just sit back waiting for things to happen to you, it's not going to go. If you haven't got a plan, then it's just going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, that's so true. I love that. You highlighted there the benefits of just taking that step back, whether that's kind of time away or working on the projects. And it's so true because when you're in the thick of it, that thing of, you just can't see the wood for the trees, can you? If you're just reacting to things as they happen day to day, and sometimes that break away for a few days, it's just such a good reset, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I think in today's society, we worry that we're not busy all the time, or that we're not posting on Instagram, or that we're not like at the center of everything. But I definitely believe in going away and doing something quiet and just thinking about things and trying to plan ahead rather than. I mean, I've spent periods of time stumbling from project to project, and I guess you go through phases in life where you do that. But I think if I had my time again, I would be a lot more thoughtful in what the kind of work that I took on, and be braver about having periods of not working, which is maybe it's easy to say now that I'm more financially secure. But I think when you're younger and you probably need to work. Most people do, but work can be quite destructive. I think things that might be more productive for you and for the world, for the climate, work can get in the way of that.
I think that I guess as a society, it's sort of a measure of with our work. It's sort of like, oh well, I'm busy, so this is a good thing. I'm seen to be being busy, and I'm doing lots of different things, but actually, I think often the reverse is true, that actually if you're able to kind of do less and be a bit more intentional with it, that the results and the impact can be far greater than when you're just sort of busy juggling all sorts of things. Yeah, so true. Yeah. And just to touch upon your comment there about the travel car, I love to travel as well. Admittedly, I don't do it quite as much as I used to, but I'm a former backpacker, and I think once you catch that travel bug, it's hard to shake it off. So, Carl, we are going to talk about your career in architecture, which has really been a career of two halves. And this is going to inspire other architects and building designers in their own career journey. I'm absolutely certain of it. I'd like to start, I guess, at the beginning, right back to studying architecture. So you studied architecture as a mature student, and one of the things you did differently is most newly qualified architects, generally they're seeking employment in a practice, or they're being employed in an existing practice. And you set up your own firm straight out of uni. And I wonder what led you to do that, because it's just kind of defies the convention of what most other people tend to do. So why did you decide to do that? Yeah,
looking back, I'm not quite sure why we did it. I think there was a touch of arrogance, maybe. But I think I graduated from a Royal College, and I guess I was surrounded by people making things, and I had a real passion to make. I was 33 when I graduated from the RCA with an MA. I'd taken quite a few years out between part one and part two, and I think I just felt like I was in the right place to actually strike out on my own. I hadn't really thought through how I would then get qualified. I just knew that I really wanted to really build things, and delivering was quite important. I felt like I could make more of an impact doing things for myself. I'd worked in really fantastic big practices like Foster and Partners, smaller, more community-focused practices like Pinoy and Prasad, and lots of others in between. And I'd learned loads. I kind of felt like I knew where I was heading and the kind of work I wanted to do, which was actually, if I'm being honest, I wanted to work on public projects. I didn't want to work on residential work. But yeah, I think four of us left together, and then it quickly whittled down to just me and Cass. So Cassian Castle, who went on to found his own practice eventually. But we ended up in a railway arch in King's Cross above an antique dealer's, and we were both kind of doing our own individual projects. And then at some point we just said, this is crazy, we may as well work together. And Turner Castle was formed, and we spent 6 years working together. And we were really two part qualified architects with a white van driving around doing projects. We won lots of projects for our tutors at the RCA, people that were designers, but maybe were not quite in the kind of construction and architecture world. So we actually, our first commissions were from other designers to help them realize their own projects. So I think, we're really inspired by the whole kind of making ethos at the RCA. And I think we'd also have this idea of fail early, fail cheap, which was very much that we wanted to quietly build a portfolio of work that we were proud of. We'd learn our trade, learn our craft. We'd do it at a small scale. And then once we'd kind of learned the skill sets that we needed, we'd then be able to apply that to bigger projects. which is effectively what we did. I think back then it was really tough for young practices to really make a mark. It was before social media. The architecture magazine world was quite a closed shop, and it was all quite highfalutin, the whole publishing world, and it was really difficult to make a breakthrough. But yeah, weirdly, we did a lot of construction work as well as architecture work, which we kind of fell into. But I think those were some of the main reasons. It was just a general. I think also we just generally felt that there were not kind of inspiring smaller practices that the people that we really admired were European practices, but I don't think either of us were in a position to just pick up and move to Europe. So yeah, for many reasons, really, we kind of stumbled into setting our own practice up. And then, we worked together for about 6 years, and then we ended up working on our own projects in the Cool River studio. So in the end, we kind of decided it was the right time to set up our actual own individual practices.
Cool. And then, I mean, having set up that practice, and you sort of mentioned that a little bit actually already, but you were doing construction projects. You weren't just designing spaces. In those early days, you sort of positioned yourself as like a small building firm that offered architectural design services alongside that. What were some of those benefits from being hands-on with construction in addition to architectural design?
Yeah, I think there's many, many benefits. And initially, the crazy situation we're in is that if we wanted to build a big extension for somebody, people would question whether we had the experience as young architects to design an extension or a loft conversion, let alone a new house or something. But actually, if we said we were contractors and we'd build it for you, people didn't ask it. They didn't even flinch. As long as the price was right and we could start within a month, it was kind of the craziness of, we'll hire somebody to build it, which is obviously in some respects a lot more tricky and risky and difficult than designing an extension, which is relatively straightforward, and you've got structural engineers and everything else. So in a way, we found a way around the system by offering more of a package where we'd almost throw in design. Obviously, we get paid for it, but we would be selling ourselves really as a design and build contractors, problem solvers. So also a collaborative spirit. So if you're a designer, we'll work with you to help realize your kind of ambitions and goals. So you might not be familiar with planning, but we can help with that. So it wasn't really a plan. It was a kind of path of least resistance, really. And I think also me and Cass, we both were fixing up our own houses in the background. I'd probably already done like 10 renovation projects by then, and we really liked building things. The other thing that we realized is it gave us much better kind of ownership of the whole project. So we didn't have to battle against a contractor who either didn't understand what we wanted or they were just trying to make as much money as possible. So, we had clients saying to us, "Oh my God, it's so amazing working with you. It's been so smooth. There's been no arguments at all. It's just seamless service." And obviously in the background, we'd be like having punch-ups with plumbers and standoffs with electricians and all the usual stuff, but just the clients were not subject to it because we just kind of took it and delivered the project. And we could decide to specify a nicer hinges than maybe the clients were paying for, and it allowed us to build a portfolio of really, really good built work and to be quite radical. Our style was quite simple, quite raw, quite industrial. And trying to get other contractors to do that is actually quite difficult. It looks quite simple, but it's quite difficult to achieve those kind of quite minimal things that everything needs to be sequenced properly and you need to really understand how to build. So it was a great education process for us. Yeah, we built a portfolio and, I think it made us better designers. It made us understand the process. I think we also built empathy for tradespeople and craftsmen, people in the industry, contractors. It's tough. It's a really tough business. And when you're the contractor, which we were, and we ended up doing quite big projects. I've built, even with Turner.Works more recent, and we built, an apartment block with 10 apartments. We built some other big community projects. But when you're ultimately responsible for it, there's nobody else to blame. If something goes wrong, you have to fix it, and it's kind of your problem. So I think it gives you a different mindset, less of a pushing the blame on somebody else, more of a mindset that, it's a problem. We need to work together as a team to solve it. And ultimately, you as the contractor or the design build contractor, it's your problem, really. You need to fix it. So I think for all those reasons, it's been a fantastic process to go through, and I'd highly recommend any architects who are thinking about maybe dabbling with construction, or young architects, working on your own home or getting into a situation where you can work on building sites. I almost think it's an essential skill set, really. I honestly don't know how people can design buildings if they don't really know how they're built, or if you've never lifted a sheet of plasterboard and you don't understand how heavy it is. It's just all of that kind of thing. To me, it's an essential ingredient of being a good designer, is knowing how to actually put buildings together.
Have you got an interesting story about running your architecture practice? Have you done something different in your business that's been hugely successful? Or has a failure taught you an important lesson that you'd be willing to share? Then why not apply to be a guest on this podcast? Just click the link in the show notes to send us your details and get started today. And if you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss another episode. Now, let's get back to the show. So many benefits there, Carl. So many. You've mentioned then, even from a client perspective as well, particularly, I guess, on some of those smaller projects, the appeal of you offering a service that's essentially like a one-stop shop, that there's one point of contact, that you mentioned that the experience for the clients was pretty seamless because the sort of wranglings that they might normally be exposed to, that you were handling all of that behind the scenes. Yeah. And you said that experience built an empathy for those craftsmen and those tradespeople as well. So you had a much better understanding of the day-to-day challenges that they have, and a better understanding of how buildings actually go together. As you say, that, like specifying products or detailing something, that we could draw something that looks great on paper, but then actually the practicalities of getting on site and actually building the thing, that's a really different perspective, isn't it? That the builder's the one there, the contractor, they're looking at the design or the detail thinking, well, yeah, this looks lovely, but like, how the heck am I going to build this? Like, how are we going to do it? And so from a design perspective, that must have been so beneficial for you as well, to be able to iterate and improve the way that you design buildings and spaces, having that knowledge and experience of actually being hands-on with it at site. And as you say, that kind of the team aspect of it as well, that you're approaching it as, look, it's not us against them, and some of that finger pointing that can ensue, oh, well, it's not our fault, it's the architect, or it's not our fault, it's the contractor, or vice versa. I imagine a lot of that's really reduced and minimized if you're approaching it in the way that you did.
Yeah, and I think we also went on to, because eventually we built up quite a big team of, as well as our architecture studio, we had a team of builders of all different skill sets that were pretty much working for us full time. So we try and keep our team together. So we'd quite often plug gaps, maybe with working for other architects as contractors. So we actually then found, so it's another benefit of being a small builder, there's not many good ones around. And if you've only got to ring up half a dozen architects, and there's bound to be a job there for you that you can pitch on, and if you're any good, you probably win it. So, we found actually that we're not only building our own projects that we designed for clients, we were just acting as a contractor, we're building another architect's project. And again, I think that helped us realize much more about kind of teamwork, and we didn't have to be the kind of the designer, if it was something that we thought was good, then we could get behind it. And I think also then having been subject to a JCT contract from a contractor's side, realizing actually how difficult it is for contractors and what a lot of risk contractors take. Everybody thinks they're making loads of money, but generally speaking, it's super risky. The margins are really tight. If anything goes slightly wrong, then you probably end up losing money. And we did a lot of really good projects for good architects, people like May, who've gone on to win the Sterling Prize. We built a small rooftop extension on a warehouse in Shoreditch for them. It's a great project. And again, we learned loads because we saw how other architects worked, because again, we were isolated in our own practice, having, set up from college. So it was great to see how other people did things and how other architects handled situations. And, I think teamwork's the word that keeps coming to mind, just realizing that, the project is the thing and that you can just be part of one of the cogs to actually deliver the project. So I think it's requires a certain level of humility to be able to do that, in that you don't have to, it doesn't have to be all about you. If it's about doing a good project, delivering it, working as a team, and accepting that you're going to learn a lot in that process. So again, I think it's another great thing architects could definitely think about doing more is, there's nothing stop an architect becoming a contractor. It's fairly straightforward. You just have to kind of take the leap, really.
Yeah. I love that the collaborative approach that you took there. You said there's an opportunity there to be able to help deliver projects that other practices had designed in the first instance, and then you were able to help deliver those. And so in doing that, there was a learning opportunity for you as a practice, which was great. Yeah. It was helping to get those other interesting projects that the other practices had designed to actually get those things built, which is really cool. And one of the things you mentioned actually a little bit earlier, Carl, was about the I guess the control that you have over it, because that's the thing, particularly in a day and age now where a lot of projects get designed, they don't get built. And, it's so frustrating. Obviously, we want to see projects that we work on, that we design, to actually get delivered and be built and to be used as intended. And that way of working that you've described, it sounds like that it gave you more control over the finished job and actually did enable those projects to be delivered to a good standard. And it's got to be a good thing, hasn't it, for everybody involved, for sure.
Yeah, no, I think it meant that at that point, we built almost everything we designed got built because we found a way of building it. And if we'd gone out through a normal tender process, it would have definitely hit a brick wall, and we'd have had to then pick it apart, or the clients would have dropped it. And that's what we find now as we scaled up and we're working on bigger projects. We only build a small fraction of what we work on, and there is a frustration there. But I think, the process that we'd put in place meant that we could we could take a bigger picture view. So a particular project might be on a knife edge in terms of viability, or we might know it might not even wash its own face, but we could keep our team together. And then there was another project over here that was going to be more viable in terms of making a bit more money. And as long as across the piece we kind of could keep all the balls in the air, then everyone's a winner. So it wasn't isolating every project out and putting it under a microscope. And there's a certain risk in that, but I think that's probably what all good contractors do. To some extent, they take on portfolio projects that they know are going to be tricky to build. They're going to be expensive, but they want to move the conversation on about the work that their company does. So I don't think we didn't particularly start out with the intention of doing that, but I think we quickly realized that we'd actually hit on something that was really in demand. It's an attitude thing more than anything, that we were kind of like can-do people, that we would just take it on as a challenge and we would try and make it work. And for ourselves, we would try and get something that was going going to filter back into the architecture world and be considered to be a success architecturally. But for us also then just the success was running a viable business, employing lots of people. At our height, we were probably employing about 50 people. And as a sort of small builder, small architects, and it was a great thing to go from zero to a lot of experience. We probably packed 20 years worth of experience into 10 years. It was crazy, the kind of thing that we often had 5-6 jobs on site at any one time that we designed and we were building. And it was felt really exciting. It was energetic, and we felt like we were really sort of making progress. And there were frustrations. Obviously, we were frustrated that we couldn't. We seemed to get just more and more of the same sorts of projects. We didn't really scale up at all. The projects were all kind of stuck at a kind of single house level, mainly refurbs and big extensions. And we had ambition to build new buildings and public and other things.
So you built an amazing reputation, particularly for resi projects. You won a string of prestigious awards from the likes of RIBA, Architects Journal. We mentioned in the intro, you've had several projects featured on TV shows like George Clarke's Ugly House to Lovely House, Grand Designs. In 2013, your own home, Slip House, that was designed by you, won the RIBA Manser Medal. And in 2021, Hove House won Grand Design's House of the Year. Amazing stuff. Like, did you ever sit there and think, yes, I've made it?
There were moments like that. I think winning the Manser Medal, which is now called the House of the Year, I think getting that award with my wife, who was effectively the client, Mary, up on the stage at the RIBA in front of hundreds of people, that was a real pinnacle. And it felt like at that point I actually had the mindset that I've achieved what I wanted to achieve, really, and that maybe I was actually thinking at that point I'd probably just go off and be a small developer, that I couldn't really get beyond that glass ceiling, having, I was really a residential architect at that point. And I did have to take a little bit of time out occasionally and pinch myself, because really I'd achieved way more than I'd probably thought I would. Interestingly, winning the Manser Medal, building my own house, I actually set myself the task of trying to win the Manser Medal. So I'm not really driven by awards, but I realized it was probably the biggest award that I could win doing the kind of work that I do. And the reason that I was interested in winning awards at that point was I thought it would unlock more kind of public work, the kind of work that I really wanted to do. And I didn't expect to win it, but I set myself the goal of winning it, which sounds quite arrogant, but I think I'm definitely in that kind of mindset where you need to plan ahead. For success, you need to plan. So if you don't plan for success, you're never going to succeed, I don't think. So I thought about what I could do, given the plot that I had and the money that I had, what could I do? And it was all around creating a narrative. And it was probably a long time before people were really so focused on sustainability. And so we set out to design the house using Code for Sustainable Homes, which at that point wasn't mandatory. And it ended up being a kind of journey that we went on. We used it as a learning process to learn about sustainability. And I think that's one of the key reasons that we won that award, was we produced an unbelievably sustainable house. Code 5 had a lot of embodied carbon, but apart from that, it's still a very, very good sustainable model, I think. So I think what it actually did as well, getting to that point, was it kind of put me on the map as an individual. In a way, it began to build me as a brand. So people might have heard of me being on TV, then put my face to my name. And so then when we started to have a little breakthrough into more public work, I'd get interviewed and people would say, I saw you on Grand Designs, loved your house. And it was a conversation starter. It was an icebreaker. And it wasn't necessarily that it was directly responsible for winning work, but I think it was a kind of, being on TV was some kind of, it kind of legitimized me in a way. I don't know, but yeah, still after winning all of these accolades, and we got to a certain point as a practice, still had this nagging feeling that hadn't achieved anything that I'd really set out to really achieve, which was to design public buildings, cultural buildings, public spaces. I wanted to work on projects that made a difference. And of course, designing nice houses and nice homes, it does make a difference, but only to a few people that get to benefit from them. I didn't really set out to work for wealthy, middle-class people who were doing very nicely. And I really, really enjoyed the process of designing those houses and building them. But to me, I kind of wasn't really fulfilled as an architect. I just felt there was something else there. Maybe it was just the grass was always greener. I'd had this itch and I hadn't scratched it. But yeah, I'm not complaining. If my career had stopped at that point, I would have, in some respects, been very, very happy. And that's the mindset I was in of maybe I'll just stop when I'm on a high and I'll just quietly go off and I'll have an easy life. That's what my wife was saying. Let's just have an easy life. All this architecture nonsense.
Building on all of that past success, you could have done that. You could have just left it and gone for the easy life. Or you could have comfortably stuck with the Resi projects, which is what you'd built that name for in the beginning. But you didn't do that. You mentioned there that there was an itch that hadn't been scratched, and a desire to do work on public projects. So you actually sold your award-winning home. You sold that and you put some of that money into a community development project called Pop Brixton. How and why did that come about, which seems quite a bold move to me? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, and again, it was a kind of accidental thing, really.
Oh, sounds intriguing. You'll have to tune into our next episode to hear the rest of Carl's story. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Architecture Business Club. If you liked this episode, think other people might enjoy it, or just want to show your support for the show, then please leave a 5-star review or rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean so much to me, and it makes it easier for new listeners to discover the show. And if you haven't done so already, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss another episode. And if you'd like to connect with me online, you can do that on most social media platforms. Just search for @Mr. John Clayton. The best place to connect with me online is LinkedIn, and you can find a link to my profile in the show notes. Remember, running your architecture business doesn't have to be hard, and you don't need to do it alone. This is Architecture Business Club,